clear spells. The nights are still long enough for that to turn things pretty cold, so temperatures close to freezing once more as we start Friday morning. Certainly in rural areas there will be a touch of frost. Again, some mist and fog patches are likely here and there, and on Friday we could see a bit more of that mist and low cloud around the coast of Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland. But again, for the vast majority, Friday is another blue sky day. We will see some thickening cloud over the Northern Isles, maybe a little bit of rain at times on Friday for Shetlands, and that'll suppress the temperatures here. But elsewhere, again, look at those temperatures jumping up after a cold start to widely into the mid to high teens by Friday afternoon. Friday evening, again, temperatures drop away, but with this area of high pressure moving in on Friday and sticking around through Saturday and Sunday, it means, yes, chilly nights, but plenty more warm, sunny spells by day. Goodbye.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, everyone. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christys and Mercy Muroki. We are live on your TV, radio and online. We're here all the way through until midday with the show jam-packed with all of the big stories, loads of chats as well, and expert guests.
Yes, and make sure you get in touch with your views. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email. We'll get to all those views throughout the show. But first, let's give you the latest news.
Thank you. Good morning. It's 10 o'clock. I'm Miranda Shunker in the GB newsroom. Boris Johnson says Russian President Vladimir Putin has already crossed a red line with his barbarism towards Ukraine. Britain has announced a new support package for the country, including 6,000 missiles. The Prime Minister says the UK is providing anti-tank and high-explosive weaponry to keep the flame of freedom alive.
I think that the reality is that Vladimir Putin has already crossed the red line into barbarism, and I think it's now up to NATO to consider together the appalling crisis in Ukraine, the appalling suffering of the people of Ukraine, and to see what more we can do to help the people of Ukraine to protect themselves, see what more we can do to tighten the economic vice around the Putin regime, and that's what some of the things we're going to be talking about.
Meanwhile, the Ukrainian president will address EU leaders later today in an unprecedented one-day trio of NATO, G7 and EU summits being held in Brussels. The meetings are aimed at maintaining Western unity against Russia, exactly 1 month since it first invaded. It's thought they could agree to ramp up military forces on the alliance's eastern flank, but NATO insists it won't send troops or planes to Ukraine.
The meeting today will demonstrate the importance of North America and Europe standing together, facing this crisis. And we are the strongest alliance in the world, and as long as we stand together, we are also safe.
The president of Ukraine says today's NATO summit will show who is Ukraine's friend and who has sold out and betrayed his country. Speaking ahead of the meeting, Volodymyr Zelensky urged people around the world to mark 1 month since the start of the Russian invasion by taking to the streets and protesting.
Show your standing. Come from your offices, your homes, your schools and universities. Come in the name of peace. Come with Ukrainian symbols to support Ukraine, to support freedom, to support life.
Challenging and uncertain times lie ahead for the country. That's according to the Chancellor, after forecasters predicted the biggest fall in living standards on record. After his spring statement, Rishi Sunak said he will support hard-working families, but Labour says he's done nothing to tackle the cost of living crisis. Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Stephen Clark, told GB News the statement was appropriate given the current climate.
We are in a very, very uncertain world at the moment, and we would be risking the public's money and crucially the delivery of vital public services if we were to spend right up to the limit here. We have to be cautious.
The chief executive of P&O Ferries is due to be quizzed by MPs over the sacking of nearly 800 workers without notice. Peter Hebblethwaite will appear in front of the Transport and Business Committee. It's as the Prime Minister says that the company had broken the law and the government will be taking action. Prosecutions have been launched over alleged health and safety failings relating to the Croydon tram crash in 2016. The Office of Rail and Road says it's prosecuting TfL, Tram Operations Limited and the driver, Alfred Dorris. 7 passengers died and 51 were injured. South Korea says it's conducted a live-fire test of multiple ballistic missiles in response to an intercontinental ballistic missile launched by North Korea. The White House has condemned the launch by North Korea, saying it's in violation of multiple UN security resolutions and risks destabilising the region. Japanese authorities said the launch appeared to be a new type of rocket. The Duke of Cambridge has expressed his profound sorrow over slavery and recognised Jamaica's pain. After days of protests, Prince William addressed the issue during a speech in the country, saying it was abhorrent. Later, the couple will fly to the Bahamas for the next stage of the Caribbean tour. And the Queen is to feature on the cover of British Vogue for the first time in a special issue celebrating her Platinum Jubilee. The April issue will showcase the 95-year-old monarch in the early years of her reign. In the tribute, the magazine will look back on its own relationship with the Queen during her 70 years on the throne. Well, you're up to date. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to The Point.
Well, good morning. This is To The Point on Geo and online. Here's what we've got coming up for you today.
Yes, well, we'll be reacting to the Chancellor's spring statement. Are the government doing their best in tough economic times, or are they out of touch with the pressures of ordinary people? We'll be speaking shortly to John McDonnell, Director of Strategy at the Adam Smith Institute.
Yes, and world leaders including Boris Johnson and US President Joe Biden are in Brussels for meetings of NATO and the G7 this morning. Our political editor Darren McCaffrey will join us with the latest. as leaders unite behind Ukraine as the country continues to fight off a Russian invasion 1 month on.
Yes, and Environment Secretary George Eustice says the government will bring forward plans to ban importing of hunting trophies. We'll be talking to one person who's responsible, really, for all of this mess. We'll get stuck into that very, very shortly.
Yes, that's all coming up and much more as well across the next couple of hours, and get in touch with your views. gbviews@gbnews is the email, and we'll read as many as we can throughout the show.
Yes, well, yesterday was the spring statement, wasn't it? Rishi Sunak unveiled some measures intended to help people with the increasing cost of living. So there was a 5p cut in fuel duty, an increase to the national living wage. But do these measures come close to dealing with the reality of the crisis?
Yes, well, our Wales reporter, Lily Hewitson, is in Cardiff this morning to give us some reaction from that region of the country. Good morning, Lily. So tell us what people there have been saying about what Rishi Sunak presented before Parliament yesterday.
Yes, good morning, Mercy and Patrick. It's been a very divided reaction from people here in Wales to the Chancellor's spring statement yesterday. It was very welcomed by the Welsh Tories here. I had a chat to the leader of the Welsh Conservatives, Andrew R.T. Davies, who told me that the Chancellor had taken swift action to protect jobs, grow the economy and also keep money in people's pockets. But it was a very different reaction from Welsh Labour, who branded the Chancellor's statement as threadbare. Now, the Welsh Government's Finance Minister, Rebecca Evans, said that the Chancellor had let down those people who were most struggling with the cost of living crisis. Now, the cut of fuel duty was something that the Welsh Conservatives really wanted to see happen in the Chancellor's statement yesterday, and that's what they got, that 5 pence cut to fuel duty, which of course came into action at 6 o'clock last night and will last for the next year. But I went out and had a chat to a couple of people yesterday, a couple of motorists, to see if that cut to fuel duty will actually make any difference to them at all.
Not in the slightest, because I'm 80 and I fill up once every 6 weeks. But it's going to make a lot of difference to people with low money, because that's where we should be looking at. I do a lot of voluntary work for a charity, and if some of these politicians saw what I see about the deprived circumstances that these people are in, perhaps then they do something about it.
Not a great deal of difference to us because we don't use the car a lot. You know, it's not as if you have to go to work every day, etc. So no, it's not going to make a great deal of difference, really.
Well, no, I don't think it will make that much difference. Everything is going up in price. Whatever you buy is increased in price, isn't it?
Now, following yesterday's statement, people here in Wales will of course benefit from that cut to fuel duty, also the national insurance threshold rise and the cut to the basic rate of income tax, which will benefit around 1.26 million people here in Wales. However, that household support fund, which the Chancellor mentioned, won't actually help vulnerable people here in Wales, as it's an England-only measure. However, £27 million will be made available to the Welsh Government to help with the cost of living crisis, but we don't yet know how exactly that money is going to be spent here.
Well, Lily, thank you for bringing us that update from Wales. Now we can go to John McDonnell, Director of Strategy at the think tank Adam Smith Institute, about what the Chancellor announced yesterday and what this could mean for ordinary people, importantly. John, thanks for joining us this morning. So let's just first get your reaction on the Chancellor's spring statement.
Well, I suppose you have to give the Chancellor credit where credit is due. The spring statement was communicated very well, and for a moment he really did sound like a tax-cutting Chancellor, even if he isn't really one. And I think it's always interesting to see before the statement comes out, analogies used about the Chancellor being a magician pulling rabbits out of hats. And that's really the thing. Magicians dazzle you with a performance. They pretend like they've done the impossible, but really all they're doing is pulling a sleight of hand. And that's what the statement really was. It's a mirage, a sort of an oasis of tax cuts, which isn't really there in relief in a sort of a desert of the cost of living and a crisis and spiraling inflation. I mean, for context, the Chancellor suggests that he has cut taxes for hardworking families. I mean, as you just heard, the fuel duty cut is intended to help those who are least well off, but in reality, it's a tax cut for motorists who are more well off, people who drive less, or rather people who are less well off tend to drive less. And the OBR finds that the Chancellor's tax cuts announced in the statement have undone just over a quarter of the overall value of personal tax rises that he announced last year, and around just a sixth of the overall net tax rises he's announced since becoming Chancellor. So we have to remember that corporation tax hikes, freezes to personal tax thresholds, and the national insurance levy still drastically outweigh the cuts he announced yesterday.
And I always do like the term hard-working families that politicians use, because it does beg the question, who are these not hard-working families? But anyway, I do want to ask you, who was the winner out of this, basically? Because as you mentioned there, living standards down at their lowest point since the 50s, highest tax burden since the 40s. Lots of people are losing out for factors beyond the Chancellor's control sometimes, but has anybody come out of this feeling wealthier? Do you think some families will genuinely feel wealthier?
No, I don't think anyone will come out of this statement or the cost of living crisis feeling any wealthier. I think the way the budget or the statement falls, it helps people on middle to slightly higher incomes more than it helps on the lowest incomes. So I think people on the lowest incomes receive about £125 over the course of the year of extra support, whereas those on middle incomes get somewhere around £300 of extra support in terms of tax cuts. So, as I say, not really any winners. Some people doing slightly better than others.
Yeah, he wants to cut tax in the future, he says. Do you believe him?
It's a difficult one. I mean, of course, he always says that he wants to put money back into people's pockets, but it's very difficult to announce tax cuts ahead of time. You don't know what's going to happen. I mean, that's what the Conservatives said with national insurance. They said they wanted to drop it, and now it's going up. And I think, to be honest, talk is cheap. Literally cheap for the Treasury. They can say it as much as they like, but until they actually decide to stop trying to collect more tax revenue, it doesn't cost them anything.
Yes, and just finally, what do you think? He says, for example, the fuel duty cut is for 12 months. We know in October energy prices are going to rise again. I just want to get your perspective on one year from now, when some of these things end and some of these things have gone up, some of the bills people are facing. Where are we going to be as a country? Because at the moment, lots of families feel like it can't get much worse than it is at this point.
I mean, it depends on a lot of factors. If inflation is still going up by then it really can get worse. I mean, it would have helped, I think, to some extent, if rather than announcing, a cut to fuel duty, the Chancellor had announced a one-off payment, perhaps a means-tested payment of about £500 for families that need it most. It really could get a lot worse, I think.
No, indeed. Well, look, John, thank you very much. John McDonnell there. Of course, Director of Strategy at the Adam Smith Institute. Just whizzing us through all these spring statements.
Yeah. On that jolly note, yes, it really could get much worse, guys.
It's about mitigation, though, isn't it? Damage limitation, do you not think?
Well, at this point, I think that's the best we can expect from the Chancellor, because it does feel like we're all doomed. That's why I was desperately hoping that there is at least some group of people who come out winning, but seems there aren't.
We're all losers. There we go.
Yes.
What we already knew. But yes, look, get in touch as well. What your thoughts are on this budget? GBViews, gbnews.uk. In fact, we're going to go to the inbox now, really. Yep. We're talking about, loads of you are talking about this budget as well. It was the MPs the last 2 decades that caused this energy crisis. The poorest were the worst off. That's from Alison. There you go. But,
well, I mean,
that's always the way, isn't it?
Yes, I was going to say that the poorest. I think it's unfair, perhaps, to say it's just the MPs. We know there are lots of, not least global events that are taking place at the moment that would have an impact on fuel and the cost of oil, and so. There are lots of factors, I would say, that are beyond the politicians' control. But as you say, it's about mitigating the effects of those factors on hard-working families, or not so hard-working families.
Or not. I'd love it if they just came out and were like, right, OK, these lazy families over here, you're not getting anything, right, OK? But no, Philip's been in touch. A joke, he says. Monday, local garage, £1.74 a litre. Tuesday, £1.79, Thursday £1.74 again. So it's I mean, basically it's not saying it's not really moved.
They are at record highs at the moment. Petrol prices. I'm pretty sure I heard something on the radio about a petrol that was £2 something. It might have been diesel, which is insane, isn't it? It's for families who really rely on getting around, especially people in rural areas who can't rely on public transport like we can in cities. it's going to really hit them hard, isn't it? Because they have no choice but to drive. They can't just hop on a bus and save money.
No, massively as well. It makes you want to ride a bike, doesn't it? Almost, just about. But yeah, keep these views coming in, of course.
The sight I'd like to see.
Well, I can't. I never learn.
You don't know how to ride a bike?
No.
You'd pick it. Maybe that's your challenge for next week.
It could be, I suppose.
Yeah,
yes, maybe. Lots of people basically say, Andy's been in touch to say he certainly doesn't feel any richer. Absolutely. Well, none of us do, really.
Yeah.
But I think, to be honest with you, I was expecting to feel a bit poorer after this budget. And actually, it's like, it's just about okay.
Yeah,
it's just well,
there are these calculators.
It's not awful.
There are these calculators online you can go on at the moment, and you type in your salary and your sort of financial situation, and then it tells you how much better off or worse off you are. I would very much advise not using those calculators if you'd like to enjoy your Thursday.
It's like Googling your symptoms. All of a sudden, you've got something like terminal. Like, just don't look at it.
Probably best to avoid those calculators. But anyway, yesterday marked 2 years since we went into lockdown. In response to coronavirus, we'll be asking how did lockdowns impact fundamental freedoms and civil liberties. That's all after this break and the weather.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Another sunny one today, and there's plenty more to come over the next few days as well. It is a little cloudier today across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, thanks to this weather front that's very weak, but it is just drifting in. High pressure, though, remains dominant and will continue to control our weather well into the weekend. That weather front, though, may just introduce the odd little bit of drizzle here and there over the Highlands, and come this afternoon there is the small chance of seeing showers break out over parts of northern England and eastern Scotland, but they'll be very isolated. Most places dry, certainly lots of sunshine for England and Wales, and again temperatures high teens, maybe up to 20 Celsius across parts of the southeast. Not quite as warm for Scotland and Northern Ireland because there is a little more cloud around here, but that cloud should tend to break up. Any of those showers over northeast Scotland will fade away quite quickly this evening, and then it's another dry night with long clear spells. Could turn a bit misty once more. A few fog patches are possible across parts of eastern England, but generally it's clear, and those temperatures tumbling down close to freezing in towns and cities across the south. Quite as cold further north, but there could be some pockets of frost almost anywhere in the countryside. On to the details for Friday. Any morning mist and fog will clear away. Yes, it'll be chilly first thing, but the sun will soon lift those temperatures. More cloud across Shetland. There is a weather front approaching here that could bring a little bit of rain, but for the vast majority, dry and sunny and warm again. Temperatures back up into the high teens. A little cooler on the coast for East Anglia and the southeast, with a bit more of a breeze blowing here, so that could be quite noticeable. The patchy rain across Shetland pushes down towards Orkney through Friday evening, but otherwise it stays dry and clear. Again, some mist and fog, and again turning a bit chilly to start the weekend, but generally the weekend more blue skies, staying dry, staying fine, sunny spells and warm by day. Goodbye.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's, sorry, I completely forgot.
What, how to read the time? It's 10:21. You all right? It's 10:21. This is To The Point with me, Patrick Christys, and just about Mercy Muroki.
We decided I would do that, but then I just completely forgot 3 seconds later. But let's continue, shall we?
Anyway, go on, you do it now then.
Yesterday marked the 2-year anniversary of the UK going into lockdown as a response to the coronavirus pandemic. The issue of COVID has been primarily a medical one, but there have also been massive ramifications, of course, for society as a whole, from the way we now approach risks to the impact on education and well-being, to very fundamental questions about freedoms and civil liberties.
Yes, well, joining us to discuss this potential ramifications is Professor Frank Ferry, Emeritus, Professor of Sociology at the University of Kent. Frank, thank you very much for joining us. Your reflections on lockdown. On balance, was it all worth it?
Possibly not. Obviously, there was a need for taking special measures. But what I'm really worried about was that there's been a tendency to turn citizens into potential patients. And I think the government and the different institutions tended to turn grown-ups, mature grown-ups, into children. So there's been a tendency to infantilize everybody. And it seemed that at a certain point, every aspect of our life became medicalized. Everything was all about public health, to the point at which issues like freedom, our capacity to think for ourselves, being able to use common sense, were all marginalized. And it seemed to me what you had for a very brief period of time, not that brief as it happens, was the rule of the expert. It was all about what science says, what research shows. And that, to some extent, created a condition where a lot of people became extremely scared and wary, lost sight of who they were, lost sight of their democratic rights. And even to this point, even now that lockdown is finished, there is still a significant section of British society that is scared to put the lockdown behind them, that still believes that wearing masks is the responsible thing to do, that is continually worried about sort of falling ill to this silent and invisible disease. And that kind of fear, which has been created and institutionalized, I think is one of the sad legacies of the whole experience.
And I'd like you to sort of explain from your field of study, sociology, what has been looked at basically in relation to the effects of the pandemic, because of course we've heard from virologists and epidemiologists and even behavioural psychologists throughout this pandemic. What can sociology as a field of study tell us about the way we've changed as a society during the pandemic?
I think what it tells us is that our relationship to the wider world, to society, has altered quite fundamentally. So, for example, one of the accomplishments of the whole experience has been to create what I would characterize as a lockdown lifestyle, where people, in a sense, want to continue with the way of life that they became used to during the lockdown. And a lot of people find it very difficult to go back to work. There's many institutions, offices, the civil service, where more than 25% of employees still insist that it's far better for them not to engage in a physical interaction with their fellow workers. And I think that's really bad for society, because it atomizes us, it makes us feel increasingly lonely and on our own. And I think that the tendency to fear social engagement and to interact with each other is really, really a corrosive legacy of the whole process.
Do you think it's made people... Yeah, do you think it's made people want more strong leadership? They look for leadership. There was a while where I think if Boris Johnson had not told us to put pants on, most people would have been walking around naked. It staggered me, didn't it? That actually really people were like craving for it, like children. Do you think we actually are there now as well?
I think there's a desire for sensible, strong leadership. I think that's quite understandable, that people want to kind of be able to trust somebody or to trust an institution. And because of the corrosive effect of our political experience in the lockdown, we're not really sure who to trust. And until very recently, everybody trusted the scientists and everybody trusted the experts. But now that we know that the whole experience wasn't as we were told, there's even a growing sense of mistrust towards that. And one of the challenges we all face is how to rebuild trust in our institution, especially given the fact that no sooner is the lockdown finished than we're now entering a phase of global warfare.
I'm very worried about kids, okay, because I think that there was a lot of their development that went, well, ruined really because of the mask wearing and the isolation. And are you expecting now a generation of kind of lost children in a way?
I hope not. I think you're right. I think the biggest mistake that was made was to close the schools, not to think about the consequences that this step had for young people, not just simply for their education, but because children learn and thrive and flourish through interacting with one another, and they were really deprived of that. I think that I think that children are fairly resilient and they can come back given the right leadership and guidance. But the one thing that I'm really worried about is that there is now a tendency, again, to medicalize childhood and suggest that children have been mentally afflicted by the experience. They've been traumatized, they're naturally depressed, they're suicidal. And it's almost as if we're telling them to feel mentally ill because of what has gone on, instead of telling them the good news is that you can now regain your childhood. The good news is that you can now experiment and make things happen. So instead of trying to get children to think of themselves as mental health patients, we need to kind of, in a sense, relate to their desire for adventure, their desire to make things happen.
Yeah, well, for the first time ever, we had more than 1 million children, under 18s anyway, being referred for urgent mental health care in the last year or the year up to February anyway. So it's obviously had an impact. But I want to know about the kind of psychology of our leaders, really, and whether or not they've kind of got the taste for it. There was talk, wasn't there, of a lockdown for flu, for goodness sake. Yeah. Actually, now, has this opened a door? Do you expect that we're going to end up in this cycle of lockdown potentially? Or at least the idea of it, at least the idea that you can curtail our civil liberties on a whim?
I think you're right to suggest that there's this so-called new normal where it becomes increasingly acceptable that somehow society comes to a halt because of a particular challenge that we're facing. And I think we lost the capacity to deal with what are actually the ordinary problems of everyday life. I mean, you have to remember that we had flus in the past, we had epidemics in the past, we had pandemics in the past, but society did not grind to a halt. Whereas now, increasingly what happens is that politicians opt for the easy option of letting the experts take over. And as you know, experts and scientists and medical people have a tendency to play it very, very safe. They're very risk averse. And their instinct is continually to limit our freedoms and limit the capacity.
You say they're risk averse. I would say they were very blinkered. I think they were risk averse when it came to COVID, which is why we had these doomsday predictions. But they were completely blind to a lot of the other impacts that those predictions were having. We've spoken about mental health, of course, we've poverty, for example, as well, for a lot of people. And I'm just wondering as well, Frank, really, at what point do the public snap? We've got a cost of living crisis. We're all going to be a little bit poorer. We could, frankly, all be a lot poorer. There's potentially the start of World War III. I don't want to, overdo it somewhat, but let's be honest, it's kicked off. And then also as well, we're kind of now coming out of this pandemic. At what point do the public go, enough?
Well, one of the interesting things in Britain today is that people are struggling to find their voice. A lot of people feel politically homeless, and they feel that they lack representatives who speak the same language as they do. And when all these problems you mentioned kind of come together, the cumulative impact of this is differential. A section of the public is becoming increasingly passive and argues and feels that there is no point in expecting anything to change for the better. But another section is feeling very, very angry and is feeling that somehow they need to do something. That you can really sense that when you talk to people. I was at a football game just last week, and in the pub afterwards, the anger towards the situation that we're confronted with was palpable. But that anger at the moment hasn't got a clear focus. There's no clear political focus through which it can be expressed in a constructive way. So at the moment, we're in a situation where it's far from clear at what point that anger, that desire for voice is going to lead to some kind of revolt or the emergence of a new party or something new and novel in our public life.
Fascinating stuff, Frank. Thank you very much. Frank Ferrady there, of course, Professor of Sociology at the University of Kent. Great to have you on the show, as always, Frank. Yeah. Many, many thanks. Right, you're going to go to our inbox now, are you?
Yes, I am. Lots of you have been getting in touch about the 5p cut to fuel duty, which was announced by Chancellor Rishi Sunak yesterday in his spring statement. A lot of anger, actually, in the inbox. People calling it a scam, people saying it's not fake news, but it's basically a fake tax cut. Yeah. And the reason they're saying that is lots of people are saying petrol stations preemptively put their prices up to sort of mitigate the cut and to make more profit. So Charles gets in touch. He says, I've heard of a number of petrol stations who put their fuel prices up by 5 pence or even 10 pence per litre yesterday and then reduced it by 5 pence at 6
Sorry, I'm
o'clock.
laughing because it's ridiculous, not because...
Yeah, lots of people saying the same thing. Clive says, you can't possibly believe that the government will reduce tax in 2 years' time, which is what Rishi Sunak says he intends to do when they've already overturned the triple lock legislation on pensions, which was in their manifesto. It's not worth the paper it's written on, and it's not the only manifesto pledges they broke. They said they'd keep foreign aid or foreign aid at 0.7. They cut that to 0.5. So manifestos maybe not worth the paper they're written on these days.
Indeed. Well, after the break, world leaders, including Prime Minister Boris Johnson and US President Joe Biden, are in Brussels for meetings at the G7 and NATO. We're going to go to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, with the latest. But before that, let's get your headlines.
Thank you. It's 10:33. I'm Miranda Shunker in the GB newsroom. Boris Johnson says Russian President Vladimir Putin has already crossed a red line with his barbarism towards Ukraine. It's as Britain announces a new support package for the country, including 6,000 missiles. The Prime Minister says the UK is providing anti-tank and high-explosive weaponry to keep the flame of freedom alive.
I think that the reality is that Vladimir Putin has already crossed the red line into barbarism, and I think it's now up to NATO to consider together the appalling crisis in Ukraine, the appalling suffering of the people of Ukraine, and to see what more we can do to help the people of Ukraine to protect themselves, see what more we can do to tighten the economic vice around the Putin regime.
Meanwhile, the Ukrainian president will address EU leaders later today in an unprecedented one-day trio of NATO, G7 and EU summits being held in Brussels. The meetings are aimed at maintaining Western unity against Russia, exactly 1 month since it first invaded. It's thought they could agree to ramp up military forces on the alliance's eastern flank. The lack of support for low-income families in the Chancellor's spring statement will leave more than 1 million Britons on the verge of absolute poverty, according to the Resolution Foundation. The think tank says the measures were a big but poorly targeted policy package. Chancellor Rishi Sunak says his plan delivers the biggest net cut to personal taxes in over a quarter of a century. And the chief executive of P&O Ferries is due to be questioned by MPs over the sacking of nearly 800 workers without notice. It's as the Prime Minister says that the company had broken the law and the government will be taking action. Well, on TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. We'll be straight back to the point in just a moment.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, it's 10:37 and this is To The Point with me, Mercy Muroki, and Patrick Christys on GB News, live on your TV, online and on radio.
Yes, well, it's been 1 month since Russia invaded Ukraine. Over the last few weeks, we've been speaking to people fleeing the war, of course, in Poland, Romania, Slovakia and Hungary.
Yes, well, helping us to do all of that was Mikola, who's a Ukrainian political scientist who spent time with one of our reporters, Paul Hawkins, and Rosie Wright as well, as they reported from the border. Alongside translating, he's been helping send aid to refugees, connecting journalists, supporting his own family, got engaged, and even rebuilt a life outside of Ukraine, while our news reporter, Rosie Wright, has this story.
One of my friends, he just sent me the video last Sunday, what is going on and happened in Kyiv. It was a missile attack and shooting just near my home. I bought this flat. I collect money for whole of my life to build one room flat on the first floor in a small Soviet Union home. Like, I remember this night when this war started. I was awake at 4:30 and see my sisters tried to contact me to say me they need to go to Poland because it's crazy. They started shooting missiles even to Korostin in my city. Thankfully, thanks for French volunteers, Tatiana. She helped me to find a place in France, and my family now is safe, and 14 members of my family, they moved to France.
Do you know what's been really amazing over the last just like 10 days or so is that you're a man of real logistics. So not just helping us with all the different languages that you speak, but connecting different journalists with other stories, humanitarian aid with people.
Yeah, suddenly I met two volunteers from Spain. They tried to find someone who speaks English or Spanish. But I had some experience. I speak Spanish, and I tried to speak with them. He said that they have some medical treatment, even insulin. But for now, for Ukraine, it's so important. And I say we can collect and send directly to Ukraine in 1 hour. And my friend Alex, his volunteer, he came to take everything and send. Now everything is on safe in the hospital, and I'm thankfully. Gracias for these volunteers, it's great guys.
People have got really different ideas, predictions about how this is going to run. What do you think is going to happen next?
Yeah, we will defend our country, we will stay safe with Ukrainian spirit. Maybe in the next few years it can be the real war with Russia, but we don't know it yet.
What do you think will stop Putin?
Nothing stops him. He's crazy. He doesn't care about anything, about the whole nations of Russia, he cares just about his ego, about his imperial ambitions. That's it.
Well, that was Mikola speaking to our Rosie Wright about, he's been very busy indeed. Yeah. He's done a lot over the last month. Of course, today is that 1 month anniversary, really, since Russia invaded Ukraine, which, it seems like that month's flown by, really, hasn't it?
Well, it has, really. I mean, I remember, obviously, I was in bed, actually, when it happened initially, but, I remember waking up and we actually we went live on air, didn't we, the next day? And it felt a bit surreal, and there was all these kind of things about, how long is it going to last? Is it going to be over in a day or two,
I think that's what perhaps the Russians expected, that it would be over in a matter of days.
Yeah, and it's, no, but it just, I don't know, do you think it seems longer than a month or less? I think for me it seems
I think it seems
longer.
Does it?
I think so. It feels like it's been going on forever.
Yeah. Well, in some sense, it has, hasn't it? Really, the wars between Russia and Ukraine, not least that 2014 invasion of the Crimea. But anyway, we will of course be speaking about all of that, including right now, because world leaders, including Prime Minister Boris Johnson and US President Joe Biden, are in Brussels today. The G7 and NATO are both having meetings with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and the global responses to it, of course, likely to be at the top of that agenda. The White House has briefed that a new package of sanctions on Russia could be announced today.
Yes, well, joining us live from Brussels to give us the latest is our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Darren, thank you very much. And, well, I suppose whiz us through what's happening.
Yeah, well, there are three, Patrick, extraordinary meetings today, one well underway. That is the NATO Leaders Summit taking place here in Brussels. All 30 leaders of NATO here, including the US President Joe Biden, first visit to Europe since that invasion of Ukraine, as you say, a month ago. That's going to be followed this lunchtime then by a meeting of the G7. Of course, Boris Johnson at both of those meetings. And then later on today, there's also going to be an extraordinary meeting of EU leaders, which Joe Biden is also expected to attend. Boris Johnson not expected at that one. Unsurprisingly, Russia is dominating these extraordinary meetings. Two key issues really on the agenda. That is further sanctions. We've heard this morning that Britain is going to impose further sanctions on 65 individuals connected to the Putin regime. We're also looking at further action, I suspect, from the European Union. The United States, though, wanting countries like Germany and France potentially to go further, Patrick, particularly on this issue of oil and gas, something they're a bit reticent to do. There are many EU countries that rely heavily on oil and gas. They fear if the taps were to be turned off, the countries would be plunged into recession. They're calling for a more gradual approach to all of that. So there are kind of splits when it comes to just how far, I suppose, the alliance, the Western alliance, if you like, is prepared to go. And then on this issue of military assistance, something that the UK is pushing much further for, they are suggesting that the Ukrainians are doing much better than anyone in the West thought they could, but that they are running out of weapons, that they need further assistance. The UK announcing today that it's going to send some 6,000 extra missiles to Ukraine, 25 million quid to help pay for soldiers and for rationing. Actually, a couple of extra million quid as well for the BBC World Service in Ukraine to provide what they would see as accurate information about what's happening on the ground. Also, we know that NATO is beefing up its Eastern Alliance, doubling essentially its assets in countries like Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria and in Poland. So quite notable movements, but again, slight splits if you like. There is a sense that Germany and France are not really stepping up to the mark in terms of military assistance. The UK and the United States want to see them go further, but we'll get further details, of course, as the day emerges and carries on.
Yeah, Darren, do you mind if I just ask you something? I want to pick your brains. Boris Johnson obviously said that he felt as though Putin had already crossed some red lines. How do you think that will be viewed by Putin? Because he seems very easy or eager even to look for some kind of provocation, doesn't he? And, you know, would it be seen as Boris Johnson kind of ramping up the rhetoric, and could it be seen as a threat by Putin? I mean, obviously he did say he crossed some red lines, didn't he?
Yeah, he did, and we heard from Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, overnight, saying that the US now had evidence that Russia had committed war crimes. That evidence, they would suggest, and it is a war crime, to deliberately target civilians. We've seen the shelling in many Ukrainian cities, not least of all Mariupol, where, you know, the hospitals, maternity wards, places where children and women have been seeking sanctuary seem to be shelled by the Russians. That would undoubtedly be a war crime. Does it help to call Vladimir Putin a war criminal? Well, I'm not sure diplomatically it would help. I'm not sure it makes a compromise any easier. But in the end, the British Prime Minister and the US President feel that he is. They feel that there's enough evidence for it. It's pretty unprecedented, by the way, to call particularly an acting head of state as a war criminal. Are we likely to see Vladimir Putin, though, when others face justice in the International Criminal Court, for example? That seems pretty unlikely at the moment as where we stand. Certainly while Putin remains in office, it's all but impossible. But clearly the United States, the UK and others feel that it is important to make that statement public to ram home the sense that they feel that war crimes have been committed, and the fears, and we heard this again from Joe Biden this week, didn't we, that Russia may well, given how badly things seem to be going for them in Ukraine, may well be prepared to use biological and chemical weapons. And that would be another red line crossed, and those questions will be raised again about what would the West's reaction to that be.
Well, thank you, Darren, and do keep us updated, of course, as the meetings go ahead, and I'm sure you will, and be bringing us that on GB News across the day. But now something closer to home. As we've been covering this morning, businesses will be mulling over the Chancellor's spring statement, with many focusing on the 5p cut to fuel duty.
Yes, well, with spiralling energy and fuel costs, companies that can't move forward without forking out for high-priced essentials are at risk of stalling. So bus operators, taxi drivers, HGV delivery teams all rely on petrol and diesel to do their jobs.
Of course, unless they drive electric, I suppose.
Yeah, but, you know...
Well, our East Midlands reporter, Will Hollis, joins us live from a driving training centre in Leicester. Good morning, Will. Driving is, I suppose, becoming a less attractive option now, isn't it, with these record prices in fuel, despite the Chancellor's 5p cut?
Yes, of course. The Chancellor's spring statement yesterday, the main focus of that for most people will be this 5p reduction on the litre in fuel duty. We've heard about things like car sharing, the ways that people are managing how they might get to places, limiting the amount of times they're driving. But if you teach people how to drive, particularly HGVs, heavy good vehicles, it's going to have a massive impact on business. So I'm joined by Andrew Eburn now from J Coates in Leicester. What does it mean to your business to see that 5p reduction on the litre? Does it go anywhere near enough to what you need?
It obviously helps. Every little bit helps. We're currently spending probably £1,000 a week more on fuel now than what we were just a few weeks ago. So every little bit helps. It would have been nice if the Chancellor could have identified essential users of diesel, such as hauliers and buses and taxis and people like that, if we could identify them and reduce it even further, that would have been that would have been obviously a greater help.
And so more of a targeted approach might help business. How is it managing that extra cost? Because these vehicles have to run, you have to train people, especially amongst, a driver shortage for HGVs, for taxi drivers, all sorts of things. That added cost, what pressure does that add on to businesses, and is it something that you have to pass on to customers?
Ultimately, you do have to pass it on to the customers, but some of our customers are government agencies, and we would be putting tenders together a year in advance and fixing prices for 5 years in advance. So it's very difficult to pass that extra cost on to those, because you have got a fixed price. Obviously, for private individuals, we can alter the price whenever we want to, but ultimately we want to try and keep the prices down as low as we can.
And so business can function at the moment, or is it that you are feeling the squeeze as so many smaller businesses maybe and regular everyday people that are just going about their life that work a regular job? Where are your problems coming in for the business?
It's definitely a squeeze. Everything's a squeeze. Then when you're running the business, you've just got to keep a really close eye on your costs. So just last week, I put an email out to all the staff about being as efficient as they can in the use of the vehicles, not doing any wasted mileage and stuff like that, just to try and keep the cost down as low as we possibly can, because we really don't want to put the prices up, but ultimately when we're faced with huge percentage rises, then we have, it's not just diesel, it's also things like AdBlue. AdBlue we have to use for the trucks. It's an emissions thing to try and get the emissions down, and we've just ordered a new batch of AdBlue, and it's gone up from 35p a litre up to 80p a litre, which is obviously a massive increase.
A lot of hidden costs that regular people won't know about, not just for petrol, not just for diesel. Of course, the Chancellor made a load of announcements yesterday, including things like national insurance. A lot of people were waiting for that announcement on national insurance, and we didn't see it yesterday, but lots more to come in the programme. Andrew, thanks so much for talking to us today.
Will, thank you for bringing us that. We were just saying actually earlier that lots of people are getting in touch in our inbox and saying it's a bit of a scam, this 5p cut, because they say they've noticed that petrol stations actually preemptively increase the price to get ready for this cut, so that, to make more profit, basically. But You would, if you could get away with it, if you're a big corporation, wouldn't you?
I suppose so, yeah.
They do take us for mugs, after all, these big corporations.
Well,
so
they do.
Why not? Why not just carry on?
They do. Right, OK, well, the Environment Secretary George Eustice has assured campaigners that the government does intend to bring in a ban on importing hunting trophies and that it will do so in the next few months. This comes after reports that the government intended to U-turn on their manifesto pledge because of organised opposition from some Tory lords.
Yes, well, joining us now is Diggory Haydock, a firearms dealer and writer who's staunchly opposed to any trophy import ban. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us. First of all, the obvious question, I suppose, is why are you opposed to a trophy hunting ban?
Well, I think, first of all, we've got to think about what that achieves. There's no point bringing in legislation of any type unless it achieves something. And I think the whole premise on which it's based is a false one. It's chucked in with a great swathe of other stuff, which I think is actually very sensible. So we've got things like shark finning and foie gras and things like that, which are probably good things to oppose. But to try and throw in the idea that sport hunting abroad is detrimental to the longevity of the animals that people are trying to focus on is just not true. So the effect, if you like, of bringing in this trophy ban will be no more than, in fact, it will be counterproductive. The people who are bringing it in think it's going to save animals and lead to fewer animals being killed. It won't. It'll actually lead to more animals being killed. More areas being degraded, more land which is currently protected by hunting concessions.
Yeah. No, I get all of that, but
to encroachment by cattle ranching and by human habitation, and what we end up with as an unhappy result of this sort of misguided legislation is fewer animals in fewer places and a degraded environment.
OK, fine, all right, I get all of this stuff, right? You have got a tiger's head behind you, haven't you? And also, as well, why do you enjoy killing animals?
Let me answer the first question. Yes, but it's from about 1900, 1890. It's just a relic.
All right, fine. Why do you enjoy killing animals?
Is this about... OK, I won't dodge the question.
Yeah.
I don't enjoy killing animals. I enjoy hunting.
You enjoy hunting?
Hunting isn't just killing animals. Hunting is an entire process. I can't explain to you now or convert you into understanding the benefits of hunting as a lifestyle choice any more than I could explain to you the desire to climb a massive mountain or to endure all sorts of other.
If you climb a mountain, but if you climb a mountain, something doesn't die at the end.
Exactly what it is in order to do that. But the point here is we're discussing the conservation benefits or the not conservation benefits of banning people from doing this. And I can show you a lot of examples where managed conservation through hunting, which provides value to the animals and money to the local people, directly leads to conservation outcomes which are positive. If you remove it, we know what happens.
Is that what you do?
All you have to do is look around. Sorry, carry on.
No, sorry, is that what you do? Or do you just go hunting?
Which bit?
The bits that you mentioned there about conservation and the preservation of the habitat, or do you just go hunting?
Well, I do both, actually. For example, if we look closer to home, because what we do here is probably quite a good example of what's achievable elsewhere. So here we have, for example, a unique bird, the red grouse. It doesn't occur anywhere else in the world. And through a policy of looking after its habitat, shooting off the excess birds so that they don't succumb to disease and degradation and population peaks and troughs, we've got a really healthy population of red grouse living in their natural environment. They're not released. All we do is look after them. And we've got this thing that we should be really proud of. Another thing would be the red deer that we have in Scotland and the other deer species that we have living in balance with our managed farmed economy and countryside. We have good numbers of these. If you look, for example, at a Scottish estate like Blair Athol, they've been using managed hunting on Blair Athol of people going out with rifles, shooting off the weaker animals, shooting off the genetically infirm animals, taking off the excess animals so that the animals that survive continue to survive and thrive on the habitat that remains for them, and that succeeds. We now have healthy herds of red deer on the Scottish hills, a healthy environment, and this can be replicated in other areas like Africa, where the big threat to animals is encroachment. It's competition with humans for land.
Can you understand why people might think it's a bit weird to go out of your way to kill an animal? You could just take up squash or something, go jogging, you know?
Well, it doesn't really matter, because how you feel about something and how I feel about it doesn't. A lot of people would argue that it's immoral to eat meat, full stop. And that's a position that you can quite legitimately take for yourself. But what we actually have to look for in terms of policy from a government point of view, which actually has repercussions, actions have reactions, and the reaction that you will get from stopping the hunting of animals in a responsible way, in managed concessions, in countries where the people who live there and manage it and know best say that this is their chosen conservation strategy.
Look, Diggory, we do have to. Yes, we do have to leave it there.
Animals you purport to want to keep.
Yeah, we do have to leave it there.
Also, by the way, sorry, I know we had a bit of back and forth there, but you're perfectly entitled to your view, and your life is your life. So obviously, we had a bit of back and forth, but I'm not,
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to listen to. Look, it's not for me, but I've enjoyed listening to you and the arguments you've made. I think many of them seem perfectly plausible to me, but again, not for me.
Could I just say to you, that's I agree, I appreciate that, but it's not just me. There were a whole group of Southern African community leaders wrote to a whole load of celebrities last year.
Diggory, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to cut you off. I'm
animals the way we see fit. We know better.
Look, we will definitely have you on again. We'd love to hear from you and talk more about that, but we do have to leave it there, Diggory.
If we don't go to the news now, I get shot. So there we go.
Firearms
dealer
the time and a writer.
Your listeners, thank you.
Who, if you couldn't tell, is staunchly opposed to the trophy import ban. But anyway, now we're finally going to take you to the headlines, and we will be back for another hour. And keep your views coming in, GBViews at gbnews.uk.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, this is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Muroki, and Patrick Christys on your TV, radio and online. We're here with you for another hour, looking at the day's top stories with expert guests and your views.
Yes, obviously, get in touch, gbviews at gbnews.uk. We'll go into those throughout the show. But first, the Chief Executive of P&O, Peter Hebblethwaite, is being questioned by MPs over the controversial sacking of loads of his staff. Let's listen in.
Why apologise after you've sacked them all?
So, the context of this incredibly difficult decision is that P&O has lost an unsustainable amount of money. And the reality is, and this is the backdrop that I would ask you please to bear in mind, is that we would have had to close the business if we hadn't...
I'm sorry to interrupt. I have lots of businesses come to my committee and tell me that, but they all consult before they make their staff redundant. You didn't. Why not?
So, we thought long and hard about the routes to this, and we did consider every single option available to us, and we concluded that every single option available to us would result in the closure of P&O. And ultimately, and I haven't had a chance, and it would be great to talk to you about what this actual new crewing model looks like, but it is a fundamentally different operating model, and no union could accept
Did you ask them?
our proposal.
Did you ask the trade unions?
No.
Okay. In your letter to the Secretary of State, you said that you notified the relevant competent authorities in Cyprus, the Bahamas and Bermuda on the 17th of March. Is that correct?
Yes.
We heard earlier that that was in breach of your notification requirements to notify Cyprus within 45 days of the first dismissal and the Bahamas and Bermuda within 30 days. Do you recognise that?
So not being a lawyer...
well, presumably you have access to lawyers, Mr.
Of course, and we are clear that we have not breached that law.
Who did you write to in Cyprus?
I will have to get back to you on that.
Who did you write to in the Bahamas?
I'll have to get back to you
Who
on
did you
that.
write to in Bermuda?
Let me respond.
Did you sign off these letters?
No.
Can you provide this committee with copies of them?
Yes.
Thank you. What's your salary, Mr. Hebblethwaite?
My salary is a basic salary of £325,000.
You have access to a performance-related bonus?
I have access to 2 performance-related bonus, a short-term incentive plan and a long-term incentive plan.
Do you think you've increased or decreased the value of P&O Ferries by your actions?
I think that P&O was otherwise going to close and didn't have a future.
And so if your employers are, might I suggest, mad enough to offer you a performance-related bonus, will you accept it or reject it?
I can't tell you how far that is from my
As a point of principle, will you accept it or reject it?
I don't know the answer to that. If we manage to save the company...
It's a decision for you. If I'm offering you a performance-related bonus and you've just sacked 800 people, will you, as a point of principle, say, I'm not going to take that?
I don't know the answer to
You
that.
don't
I've got to be honest, I'm not focused on that. I'm focused on saving the business and getting the 800 seafarers new jobs.
Right. You recognise that asking your employees to sign a settlement agreement means that they are withdrawing their rights for further legal action against P&O?
Yes, I do. And we are making extremely generous payments as a result of that. £36.5 million, we think the largest maritime settlement arrangement in history. There will be people receiving upwards of £170,000, but actually probably, I don't know, very few. There will be about 40 who will receive more than 100,000, but most importantly, actually, is at the other end of that scale where we have capped the minimum. So if somebody started work with us in the last month or so, actually we've said that we will pay a minimum of £15,000. So we've uncapped the top, and we've absolutely said as a minimum we will pay £15,000. We recognise we did a very, very difficult thing. We recognise money isn't everything, but we do want to compensate people fully, and I absolutely want to be focused on getting them all new jobs.
Thank you. Mr. Christiansen on the screen, please, from DP World, the owner of P&O Ferries. Are you going to sack Mr. Hebblethwaite for gross misconduct?
I couldn't imagine that we would do that, no.
And did you sign off on these proposals?
So, DP World has been informed on a continuous basis on the situation in P&O Ferries, obviously as the shareholder.
Did you sign off?
And we have also been informed of the evaluations that P&O Ferries have had in terms of different routes to making this business viable and sustainable, and eventually also being informed and supporting the decision that was then eventually taken.
Thank you. And Mr. Hepplethwaite's just said, Mr. Christensen, that P&O Ferries is about to presumably go immediately bust unless you sacked 800 members of your staff. Do you agree with that assessment?
So the business, P&O Ferries, has definitely lost a lot of money over the last few years. No business can sustain that forever. The business was not viable in that situation or under those conditions. So a number of things have been evaluated, and eventually this model was then chosen as the only route available as an alternative to ending up in liquidation or like.
It's very strange, Mr. Christensen, because lots of other businesses in trouble follow perfectly legal routes, but you seem to be having no regrets about the decisions taken by your business. The last question from me, whilst I've got you, Mr.
Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, having no regrets. You have not heard me saying that we have no regrets. We acknowledge.
Would you like to express
also as DP World, we acknowledge the pain that this has caused to a lot of people, employees, seafarers, their families, etc. So you're not heard me saying that we do not acknowledge that pain.
I'm sure the families are grateful for your regrets after sacking them, Mr. Christensen. My last question for you is, I understand that DP World owes £146 million to the Merchant Navy Ratings Pension Fund. When are you going to pay that?
I don't know if the 146 is the right number. I have no knowledge of that.
I understand it is, and I also understand that you paid £147 million sponsoring a golf tournament, so it should be affordable for you, shouldn't it?
May I add a point?
Please.
So the liability for the pension fund, as I understand it, is a P&O liability, and we have an agreement, and we will honour those agreements to make those repayments.
Thank you. And DP World will be giving you the money to do that, presumably, given you don't have any.
Well, sadly, the reality is this was a very difficult step that we had to take to make the company viable and profitable, at which point we will be able to honour our own commitments.
Very good. Andy McDonald.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Christensen, you talk about this being painful and difficult. Your company paid out $376 million in dividends to shareholders in the last 2 years alone. Couldn't you use some of that money to treat the workforce at P&O with some decency and dignity? Don't you think that was your duty?
So DP World has taken absolutely zero dividends out of P&O Ferries for the last many years. We have, on the contrary, we have kept on supporting the business over and over again, supporting the existence of that business for a number of years with hundreds of millions of pounds.
Okay, without regard to the welfare of the workforce. Mr. Hepplethwaite, did P&O have a duty to consult the unions in good time over the redundancies pursuant to Section 188 of the Trade Union Act of 1992?
There's absolutely no doubt that we were required to consult with the unions. We chose not to do that because we believe...
You chose to break the law?
Because we chose not to consult, and we will will compensate everybody in full for that. I recognise that this is a really
When you get in your car and drive down the motorway and you see the 70-mile-an-hour sign, do you say that that's not going to apply to me, I'm going to do 90 because I think it's important that I do that? Is that how you go about your life?
No.
No, it isn't. Did the collective agreements in place between P&O and RMT and Nautilus provide for negotiation over such matters as redundancies?
Sorry, could you rephrase the question?
You had collective agreements with RMT and Nautilus. That provides for negotiation over such matters as redundancies. You've done it before. Why didn't you do it? What was the moral justification for you not doing that?
Okay, so these are very extreme circumstances. In order to answer that question fully, can I explain the difference between the operational model that we previously had and the one that we are moving to, so that you understand how fundamental a change it is, and that helps me explain why we had to take the route we had to take. Would you allow me to
Sorry,
do
as
that?
the chair has already pointed out, there's many companies that have difficulties. They obey the law and they consult with their members through their trade unions. You haven't done that.
We've moved from one operating model to another. And
You haven't escaped the law of this country. You've still got to do it within the legal framework. You can't just decide that you're going to absent yourself from the legal system of the United Kingdom.
So it was our assessment that the change was of such a magnitude that no union could possibly accept our proposal.
Oh, you're
And
right
on
about that,
basis-
Mr. Hamilton. I've never heard such farcical answers to a series of questions. Okay, can I move on, Chair? In selecting UK employees, most of whom will be UK nationals or residents, when you selected them for dismissal, P&O has evidently discriminated against them on grounds of nationality. What was the legal justification for doing this?
To be clear, actually, these weren't exclusively UK nationals. They were largely UK nationals, but this was a group of international employees.
So what are the new rates of pay to be offered to the new crews? How much are you paying them?
The two models are very different. So to answer that question is a bit more complicated, if you can allow me the time. The previous operating model required us to have 4 crews for every ship on Dover-Calais. The new operating model requires us to have 2 crews and pay people when they work. So they're assessed in slightly different ways. The answer to your question is that the average Jersey seafarer was paid £36,000 and will receive £46,500, so a year and a third in compensation. So that's part of the answer to the question. The second part of the question is, what are the hourly rates of pay for the new model? So the average hourly rate of pay is £5.50. On top of that, there is a pension contribution, there is food and accommodation.
That's more than minimum wage.
And then, sorry, can I make a couple of points, please? So on the routes that are international routes that are governed by ITF standards, we are paying above ITF minimum wages. And on our domestic route, which I think was referenced earlier, Larne, Cairn, Ryan, where we are governed by national minimum wage, of course we are paying national minimum wage.
And so the seafarers aboard the vessels that are leaving Dover, the replacement crew, they're going to be paying on average, paid at the rate of £5.50 per hour. That's below the national minimum wage of this country. How do you reconcile that?
Where we are governed by national minimum wage, we will absolutely pay national minimum wage. This is an international seafaring model that is consistent with models throughout the globe and our competitors.
Could you live on it, Mr. Heatherthwaite, £5.50 an hour? Could you sustain your lifestyle on £5.50 an hour? No, you couldn't, could you? Why do you expect people who've got such responsible jobs to be able to do that? How do you expect them to be able to feed their families and pay their bills at £5.50 an hour?
So there's a couple of very, very important points here.
One's called gas, one's called electric. Those are the important points. They can't pay their bills.
One couple of important points, please. The seafarers who join us are international professional seafarers with all the international certification. These are experienced seafarers.
I'm going to move on. I've got to move on. Can I ask Mr. Christensen? Because Mr. Christensen, on your website, DP World, you say the DP World respects and supports the human rights of our employees. You go on to say, amongst other things, in relation to collective bargaining, DP World respects the laws and labour practices for each country and will not hinder the development of means for independent and free association. How do you square that with the experience of your company, P&O?
Sorry, the line was breaking up. One more time, please. The latter part of the question.
Well, you'll be familiar with your own human rights statement, which adheres to the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, the ILO Declaration on Fundamental Principles and Rights at Work, the Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, and yet you've completely trashed them in this. They're not worth... Are you going to take this down off your website because it's an insult?
So I do not believe that it's an insult, and I do not believe that any of what we have done, P&O
You need to ask the 800 people that
is in conflict with any of that.
Of course it's a direct conflict. We hear some ridiculous things, but for you to say that those principles still obtain when people have been summarily dismissed without no notice whatsoever and replaced by people on £5.50 an hour is an outrage. There's some NDAs here, Mr Hepplesworth. Are you going to rescind those? Because, quite frankly, the members of this committee think this is absolute thuggery and criminality. You're behaving like gangsters to blackmail people into this situation. Will you withdraw those NDAs and let people have the freedoms that we all enjoy?
I'm assuming you're talking about the confidentiality clause that's in the severance agreements?
Gagging agreements, yes.
It's a standard confidentiality clause, and actually it's there to protect both sides.
Oh God. Okay, I'm just getting into the end of this. Let me just ask one more. Why did you employ a private security firm to remove seafarers from your vessel? Were you pleased with what you saw on our televisions, on social media, of people with handcuffs marching up the gangplanks onto these vessels? Why did you do that?
But I don't think you have seen pictures of people in handcuffs, because actually it was very clear we did employ a security firm of professionals, and actually and the reason for that was to keep our people and the ships safe. And the reality is, coming out of this, is that we didn't get a single incident throughout the day. We kept everybody safe, everybody secure.
Mr Hepplesworth, people were terrified. They were going about their work in the ordinary way to see people invade the ships and start ordering them about, telling them that they had to pack their bags and go. Is that a humane way to treat loyal employees who've given you such incredible service? Is that decent?
The security team were there to keep the ships and, most importantly, the people safe at a time that was genuinely a stressful time for them. It was our assessment that was
stressful because you made it stressful. You were the author of the stress.
There's no doubt that when people hear that they are losing their job, it is extremely stressful, and we wanted to keep the ships and, most importantly, our people safe.
Thank you. Gavin Newlands, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think just to come back on this, can you perhaps clarify for the committee and to everyone watching and to the P&O workers, what employment law provisions have you breached?
So we have not consulted, and for that we are fully compensating people for that in full up.
And how much is the business going to save each year by sacking the crew summarily and employing agency staff?
So this entirely different model is about half the price of the previous model.
About half the price?
Yeah.
And you said the average wage of the seafarers in the new model. What's the lowest minimum lowest hourly rate in the new model?
£5.15.
The lowest?
Yeah.
You said in answer to Mr MacDonald the average was £5.50. Is everyone from the bottom?
£5.15.
£5.15.
Yeah. So £5.15. The average range is from £5.50 to about £6, depending on exchange rate. But I gave you the low end of that.
£5.15. And do you think that's a fair wage? Do you think the international maritime laws in terms of wages are fair and sustainable, or as many people now see it as modern day slavery? What would you say to that?
So the rates that we're paying are in line or above ITF minimum standards, and it is the operating model that the vast majority of operators across the globe work to. So this is the competitive standard.
I appreciate that, but do you think the ITF standards are fair and reasonable? Is that something that the world, perhaps in light of this, that your action are going to have to look at and address?
I think that they're negotiated rates of pay, and therefore those have been successfully negotiated on both parts.
I'm not sure how successful it was on the workers' part, to be perfectly honest. Over the last year, have P&O or indeed DP World broached with any government minister or official that you may be changing practice at any point? Not an official notification of what you did last Thursday, but any hint or indication as to what you might be doing or looking at?
I can share my understanding, but I wasn't at the meeting. So I believe that on the 22nd of November, the Secretary of State for Transport was visiting Dubai, and at Expo he met with some of the DP World exec team, and as part of a broader ranging discussion, which included ongoing investment in the British economy, the subject of P&O Ferries was brought up, and that we would be needing to make some changes to our business this year. Beyond that, I can't confirm. All I can say is that at that point in our planning, we hadn't finalised our plans, so I doubt any conversation went further than that, but I don't know.
I appreciate that the final plans hadn't been made, but that's quite an important point you've just raised. Could you perhaps look into that and provide the committee with more detail on that meeting? Because the fact that the government perhaps were warned that something was afoot months in advance is quite an interesting point the committee might want to know. Can I turn my attention to Mr Christensen? Has any other DP World company ever undertaken such an action? Is this standard practice for DP World, or is this a first?
I don't know, to be quite honest. In the period of time that I have been occupied with DP World, I do not think that there has been anything similar to this, but we've also not had a situation in the company or in the businesses that is owned by DP World that is similar to the one that P&O Ferries has been finding itself in.
Well, just for clarity, could you perhaps again write to the committee just to confirm that indeed this is the first time a DP World company has undertaken this sort of action? And for the impact on DP World, are you concerned what this might mean for DP World and its relationship with the UK government moving forward? And as we understand it, you have an agreement in place with the government with regards to free ports. Do you think this will have an impact on that agreement?
So I am responsible for the maritime activities in DP World and cannot speak for what that means to other parts of the business. But I can assure you, as we have done, both Mr. Hebbleswaith and me in this session, that we've taken a lot of consideration to the decision that was taken here. P&O Ferries Board have been coming to DP World, consulting with us on this. We've been informed. We have made everything that we could to make sure that all proper care was taken. We have done everything that we can do to make sure that the people affected are being looked after. So, yeah, of course, we have taken into consideration that this decision could have some kind of impact beyond P&O Ferries. But still, we have had given P&O Ferries the support for that decision under the prevailing circumstances.
Did you essentially force P&O to take this decision, or was it just a broader, they must save X million?
Sorry, one more time.
Did DP World force P&O to take this decision?
So P&O Ferries is a business in its own good right, and the P&O Ferries Board will have to take the business decisions for P&O Ferries that it has to take. So DP World is interested and obviously focused on making sure that our businesses are viable, whether they are in the one corner of the world or the other. But at the end of the day, the operational decisions in P&O Ferries is P&O Ferries to decide upon.
Okay, thanks. And back to Mr. Hebbleswaith, did you anticipate such a reaction?
Could I also just confirm Mr. Christensen's point? This was a P&O Ferries board decision. We, of course, required funding and support to do it, but ultimately this was a P&O Ferries decision. This was not forced on us or even suggested to us by DP World. But, sorry, your question was?
What was my question again?
Were you expecting this reaction?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I do apologise.
Thank you, Mr. Bradshaw.
The reaction to this has been extremely strong. There's no question about that, and I do regret that, and I recognise it. I really, really do recognise it. But there was no P&O without the changes that we needed to make. So we anticipated this would be very difficult, very controversial.
And lastly, from me, before I hand back to the Chair, are you not concerned that these actions will actually bring about the end of P&O rather than save it?
I think we've got a tough job to do now to rebuild the business, but I think a P&O with a future and a P&O that is able to be competitive, pay its own bills and offer the customer service that is required has a much better chance.
Thank you. I'm afraid I have indications for questions from literally every member of the committee, so apart from you. So I'm going to call you all, but please just keep your questions and answers tight and keep it moving, please. Nusrat Ghani.
Thank you. Mr Hebblewaite, is it accurate that you said that the Minister was informed on the 27th of November?
22nd.
22nd of November?
Is my understanding.
Which one? Which Minister?
The Secretary of State for Transport. If I misspoke, I apologise.
You have a minute of that conversation?
I don't know.
Thank you. What a mess. What a mess. So P&O Ferries have been operating since 1844, and then in one Zoom meeting you trash it all. 800 people now on the dole, and you're now trying to clean this up, having ruined the reputation of P&O Ferries and undermined everything we're trying to do in the sector, even encouraging people to come forward and become seafarers. And you were saying that you've got a number of regrets. I've just been sent a picture of Pride of Kent where I believe crew that you've dumped on the dole, all of their bits and pieces are in bin bags. Why have you done that? Why don't you fix that right now? Why don't you fix that right now? Make sure that the people that you fired have some dignity and get hold of the items that they've left behind. Can you fix that right here, right now?
So actually I've already taken steps to see what has happened there, and I have been assured, so we will find out the specifics of that photograph, but I have been assured that the team are taking personal responsibility for returning people's belongings to them.
Take them out the bin bags and give them back to the people they belong to. Give them some dignity.
The bags that people were given was on the day so they could have something to carry off the possessions that they could carry. The possessions they're otherwise taking, we're returning to them, and we're employing companies to do that and box them up and return them.
So you would have heard from the early session the anxiety that we have that the MCA will be able to credibly allow the ships to sail, and you've come forward to say you've got a number of regrets, and we would have hoped that maybe you're going to be treating the new crew a little bit better. I've had messages over the weekend from people on board, and this doesn't give me any confidence you're going to treat the new crew any better. So the message say the replacement officers were not informed they were replacing crew being made redundant. We were told that a new company was being set up and that it could possibly be from Glasgow. No representatives from P&O were present when they were on board the ships to brief the new officers, and we've had no direction from P&O as to next steps to take. You must understand the fundamentals of managing a passenger ferry service. Surely you've been told and briefed. This gives me no confidence that the new crew have confidence in the leadership, or even your leadership, or whether they think the ferries are competent to sail. What's going on? It just seems to get worse every day.
So, a couple of things. We did employ a professional security firm to talk to people. We had to talk to them all at the same time. You mentioned a Zoom call. So the nature of this crewing model is that at any one time, half of our seafarers were on board and the other half were at home spread throughout Europe. And so we wanted to inform everybody at the same time. So people on board, where at all possible, we spoke to them in person. People who were not and who were at home and spread throughout Europe, we had no option but to invite them to a Teams meeting. There was a live meeting. Yes, it was scripted, but it wasn't pre-recorded. I think that's important. And then we followed that up with one-to-one phone calls where we could get hold of them, and of course we followed up in writing.
Replacement officers.
Yes.
Why have they not been given one-to-one meetings? Why have they not been spoken to by P&O leadership, P&O Ferries leadership?
So we've been on board. In fact, we've had some of our fleet management team and our ships support services have actually been living on board the ships to help with the familiarisation and the training. I've been on board. I've spoken to the new crew and the new officers. We've had 51 officers ask for the paperwork to join the crewing management company and come back and help rebuild the business.
Can I ask why you didn't come forward to the department to ask for more advice or guidance to try and get you out of the situation you felt that you were in?
So we felt it's important that we were able to have a viable ongoing business, and we needed to move to a competitive operating model that is recognised throughout the world and our competitors also use. It was a very difficult step we had to take, and all of my regrets are around the impact it's had on the individuals, but I do recognise it is a step we had to take. We didn't talk to really very many people at all because of the nature of, we knew it was going to be controversial and it needed to be confidential, because without that confidentiality we simply wouldn't have been able to implement this incredibly difficult decision.
Did you change anything, knowing what you know now, what you did last Thursday?
That's a really, really difficult question. The business would close. The business was not viable. This is the only way for us to save this business, and we have moved to a model that is internationally recognised and widely used across the globe and by our competitors. I would make this decision again, I'm afraid.
Wow. Just one quick clarification before I go on to another member. You said, Mr. Heppelthwaite, to Ms. Garney that you had a discussion with the Transport Secretary on the 22nd of November.
I didn't have that. I wasn't part of that discussion, but I believe that a conversation was had in Dubai at Expo on the 22nd of November.
With who?
With
No, but who was the Secretary having a conversation with? It wasn't you. Who was it?
Transport. Sorry,
so the Transport Secretary had a discussion with somebody in Dubai.
Yes.
Who?
Some senior execs at DP World. I don't know who. I wasn't there.
Mr. Christensen, who had that conversation with the Transport Secretary in Dubai?
I don't know either. I was also not participating in the.
Presumably, you can find out for us and let us know.
Yes, I think that Mr. Newlands asked us to do that.
Thank you.
But can I please reiterate? At that point, our plans were nowhere near finalised, so it is unlikely that that conversation would have had any real substance to it, I suspect.
You didn't participate.
Okay, Graham Morris, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. You may recall, Mr. Heppelthwaite, previously, this is a joint committee with the of Transport and Vice. There was an invitation from Transport to come to our committee. We were looking at COVID support during the pandemic, and there was a change in the chief exec at the time, and that wasn't possible. But that was arising out of the COVID support the company received, and I think the freight grant as well. It was around about £15 million. But it was also because a number of redundancies had been announced, affecting a number of ports where P&O Ferries were involved. What was different that you were prepared to respect UK law and consult with the recognised trade unions on that occasion, and yet weren't prepared to do it on this occasion?
So it's quite a lot that was different, but it's a good question. So during the COVID pandemic, during the height of it, we anticipated it would come to an end in the early part of 2021, and we anticipated that we would be able to restructure the business with limited redundancies, and that was a reasonable conversation, and we absolutely consulted with that. The COVID pandemic has gone on much longer, and we now need to fundamentally address the viability of this business. Otherwise it closes and an additional 2,200 people lose their jobs. And so in this situation we will need to change our operating model, and on that basis, and I know the reaction I got last time, but it is true that we assessed that given the fundamental nature of change, that no union could accept it. And therefore we chose not to consult, because a consultation process would have been a sham, and we didn't want to put anybody through that, and we are compensating people in full and upfront for that decision.
Do you have a name for this new operating model, the new operating model that you're applying with the reduced crewing and so on?
It's called multiple things. People call it agency crew. I talk about running our crewing through a crewing management company.
I've heard it rather crudely referred to as the skeleton crew model.
I think it's really dangerous that I let that lie. These are very, very experienced fully certified professional international seafarers.
I just
Pay them decent wages then.
I know time. Yeah, well,
on 50 an hour.
I know time's
sorry,
really short.
I'm going to have to move on. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll call you at the end if I've forgot time. Paul Howell, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just find it bizarre that as a business you've chosen to break the law as a business decision. It's incomprehensible to me. P&O are now a laughing stock. I don't know whether you'll find that it's your Gerard Ratner moment in terms of a business. You're seen as contemptible by any right-minded people as to the way you're running your business. I really don't understand how you think that the government or anybody else is going to want to engage with P&O or DP World in anything with any faith or any trust that you're going to do anything that you say that you're going to do in future. With hindsight, do you really think this is a sustainable way to have your future? Do you think that this is a viable way to run a business?
I think that we weren't viable before, and I know that if we hadn't made radical changes, the business would have closed. And I know I keep repeating it, and I apologise for that, but genuinely that would not have been 800 redundancies with substantial severance packages. That would have been 3,000 people losing their jobs, and the impact on 3,000 people throughout multiple nationalities.
Mr. Christensen, you made the comment earlier that it was your part of the business that was involved in this, and that I got the impression that the broader DP World assessment wasn't fully considered into this. And it was, you talk about not it being associated to the teams that are involved in the Freeports type agendas. Do you now regret that? I mean, it seems to me as though what you've done is you've exposed your entire business to contempt, not just the risk of P&O going down. Do you have any regret of that, even just from a pure business strategy point of view?
Let me once again stress that this decision was also not an easy one for us to sign off and support in terms of P&O Ferries. Of course it wasn't. I think the commitment of DP World to the UK economy, about billions of pounds of investment in terminals and free zones, etc. That commitment, I think, is second to none. I mean, we have not invested more funds anywhere else outside of Dubai than in the UK. And the commitment to P&O Ferries, and therefore also a British icon, somebody mentioned back to 1847. Yeah, that the commitment is also a part of us being very observant to, in this case, that we have done everything that we could to make sure that people were taken care of. It was also noted a little bit earlier that the packages that have been offered to the affected employees, that they are funded out of DP World, and they are. And therefore, that has been very important to us to make sure that we did everything we could to support the people who were affected by this. That is also a commitment that we do to make sure that that doesn't make the decision any easier, but at least we have taken it very seriously to try to make the impact as bearable, if I can use that word, as possible.
Just to wrap it, Chair, and really I think it's bizarre that you think that the right way to do it is to buy your way out of following UK law, and I think that's just something that will come back and bite you. Sorry, Chair.
Thank you. Simon Jupp, please.
Thank you. Mr. Habblethwaite, you've said in this session that what you've done to 800 working people, including people in my own constituency, was necessary to save P&O. Stinks. You might have avoided financial bankruptcy, but in the minds of many customers, you are morally bankrupt. What have you done to the brand?
So, no question, the brand has taken a hit. There's no question about it. I don't deny that. And we did something that was incredibly difficult and we knew was going to be controversial. But we now have a business that we can rebuild and grow. A competitive, modern business. I am very, very sorry to those 800 people and their families. But otherwise, the whole business would have closed, and we would have lost a British icon, and 3,000 people would have lost their jobs. And that is the backdrop.
The icon's mired, though, now. The icon is mired in this disgraceful behaviour. How will you recover your brand?
It's no longer an icon.
It's not a British icon anymore. It's not something we're proud of.
Well, we have a future now. We don't have to close the business.
You really think you've got a future? Do you think the customers will want to buy tickets from you knowing what you've done?
I really do. I think it will take a while. I do think that there is a hit to our business, and I am, again, incredibly sorry. But we do have a future. We do have a business that is now competitive, that now can meet the customer needs and can pay its bills.
Are you hearing from your booking systems that people are cancelling tickets, cancelling their trips? Yes? To what extent?
Well, we're not actually on sale, obviously, because at the moment we're not.
But in the future tickets that have already been bought for things and trips that people were looking forward to, have they cancelled them as a result of this?
Some people certainly have, and it's the reduction in bookings is different on different routes, partly because people buy with a different in a different pattern on different routes. So on Dover-Calais, we have taken a particularly large decline, but it's because those bookings tend to be made 2 weeks ahead. On something like Hull-Europort, where people make bookings 3 or 4 months in advance, we're still maintaining strong levels of booking, as we are on Larne Kenryan.
Okay. Thank you, Simon. Chris Loader, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Heatherthwaite, thank you. I have 3 very short questions for you.
One, ideally.
They're ultra short. You've basically sacked employees and outsourced employment to agency staff, I think that's the correct assumption, to approximately a third of your workforce. That is predominantly also to UK citizens. Could you just tell us briefly why you haven't done that to French citizens or Dutch citizens, why it's just UK citizens?
So the vast majority of our crewing model was employed through Jersey. We have, it might be double figures of French employees, and we have very few numbers of Dutch employees. So this was about...
It's easy to sack them here, that's why. Yeah.
Okay. Where is your office based?
I have an office in Dover and I have an office in Hull.
Could you just tell us why your ships are flagged in Cyprus, Bahamas and Barbados when they sail from the United Kingdom?
So this predates me by some way, but there was a change made, and I believe that the move to Cyprus was to do with maintaining our commitments to the French tonnage tax that we have.
Okay, thank you. And very briefly, I'm assuming you risk assessed this enormous change in your business, and I'm assuming you had a safety risk assessment. Could you tell us what the result of that risk assessment was, and whether or not you actually shared it with the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency?
So one of the reasons for engaging this security firm was to keep everybody and our ships, but most importantly everybody, safe. And I have to restate, and I think it's a really important point, that with all the rumours out there, the reality and the facts are that we didn't have a single incident.
Can I just be clear with you? I'm talking about your ability, your licence to operate. This is what it's about. Have you risk assessed the enormous change, and have the MCA signed off that risk assessment? Because, in my opinion, I cannot understand how you can continue to operate ships safely in a way where you completely remove your workforce and the MCA have not signed that off. And I'm sorry I didn't ask the earlier witnesses that question specifically, but I don't think that's been signed off.
So let me just confirm a couple of things for you. We engaged with the MCA before the 17th of March. We engaged with them first thing on the 16th. Please let me finish.
The assessment is the question. Please.
So, okay, so specific thing, I don't know the answer to that, let me find out. But can I just reassure you about...
Just finally, I'm sorry to say this, and Chair, I'm just about to finish, I apologise. But do you mean to tell this committee that the Chief Executive of P&O has not signed off a safety risk assessment for massive change in your business? Am I right in saying that?
All of our team have been on this. I haven't seen the risk assessment. I will get that back to you.
I hope the MCA are listening to this, because this is outrageous. I cannot believe that you can maintain your position, sir. I'm so sorry that you have signed off such enormous change and you have not directly seen the safety risk assessment. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to hand back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Alan Brown, please.
Back to employment law. This is done under UK employment law. Could you do that under French law or under law of the Netherlands in terms of employment law, this type of mass sacking?
I haven't explored that, so I don't know the answer to that. I'm not a lawyer, I'm afraid.
And at no point you've taken advantage of more lax laws in the UK?
So this was not a UK, the intention here was not the UK, the intention was to move from one operating model to another, as I hope I've
returned to that. Thanks, yeah.
Thank you. Ben Bradshaw.
Sorry, clarification on that. You have Dutch and French-based staff.
Yes,
who
very
have not
few.
been treated in the same way.
Correct.
So.
But in fact, to be clear, they are a very small proportion of our overall crewing model.
Why haven't you treated them in the same way?
Because this was about addressing an uncompetitive and unsustainable crewing model that we have from our Jersey-based crew.
Doesn't answer the question. Doesn't answer the question.
And then there was one final question from Graham.
Thanks very much. We're looking for a remedy here, and the option that you've gone for, the model that you've gone for, must be hugely expensive. The recruitment costs, the specialist security firm, suspending operations so there's no revenue, the costs of redundancy of the loyal workforce. Are there any circumstances, perhaps the threat of an unlimited fine, that would cause P&O Ferries to think again and reinstate the workforce?
As I say, the business was unviable and unsustainable and would have had to close had we not made this incredibly difficult decision, and I'm genuinely, deeply sorry to those people affected and their families.
The answer is no.
The answer is, if we went back to the previous model, we would have to close the business. It is not viable.
Thank you. Mr. Hebblethwaite, at the beginning of this panel, I asked whether you either didn't know what you were doing or whether you willfully broke the law. You said to this committee today that you willfully broke the law. You chose not to consult, even though you know you should have done, but you decided to pay people off with compensation in order to break the law. Does that not give you concern that you're in breach of your legal obligations as a company director under company law?
So, as I say, I completely hold our hands up, our hands up, that we did choose not to consult.
That's quite amazing, isn't it? You're coming to this parliament and putting your hands up and saying you willfully chose to break the law. Believe it?
We did not believe that there was any other way to do this,
No
and we
other way
are
than to break the
compensating
law.
people in full.
Okay.
Oh my God.
Sorry. I'm afraid we've run out of time, but Peter Hebblethwaite and Jasper Christensen, thank you for your time. We're now going to change the chair in order to start the ministerial session. I'm told
Wow.
Wow.
What a session there. I mean, it's not often a session of a committee is so riveting.
It was
almost.
absolutely gripping.
Yes.
I mean, I must say, there were a lot of points there to highlight, I think. So, essentially, as you just heard there, Peter Hebblethwaite, the CEO of P&O, basically kind of did, you know, as you heard there, and he kind of admitted that he willfully broke the law and decided that they were going to pay compensation for the staff there. That's one thing. The fact that he hadn't, according to what we just heard there anyway, he hadn't signed off on a risk assessment. I thought the question that should have been out. Well, look, there was a load of great questions. I want to know where he was whilst that decision was being made. Or sorry, not whilst it was being announced, right? So I want to know exactly where Peter was when his staff were being sacked, because you know, if you can imagine that headline, can't you? If it turns out he was at a private members club in Mayfair paying for it with the company car, which of course there's no proof or indeed allegation. I'm just saying hypothetically.
There was also a question, wasn't there? And I was very impressed actually by the quality of questions that were coming out from the members of the committee, which, by the way, that was the Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy Committee, and the chair of that, who was leading that session, was Darren Jones, Labour MP, who was very impressive, I thought.
I thought so.
In questioning the CEO. One of the things they also talked about was wages. And they said they're paying £5.15, I think it was, to the new under minimum, this new model.
I think.
I think it was minimum. which obviously is not, you know, the national living wage or minimum wage for Britain. But he said the reason they're able to pay workers under this new model is because it actually is in keeping with the particular laws that govern sort of seafarers, international seafarers, and how much they can be paid. And that's why they are getting away with being able to pay these very measly, very meagre wages. And as a result, they said, he said there that they've managed to reduce this, I think, wage bill by 50%. So it's halved the wage bill basically by sacking these 800 members of staff and then rehiring, I suppose, international and foreign workers on this much lower wage.
I thought it was quite a nice line, excuse me, quite a nice line in there from him as well, where they said, you know, why didn't you consult the unions? Well, he said, well, we came to the conclusion that nothing that we would say to them would be palatable enough, so we just didn't bother. I thought, actually, that's quite a good answer. Because, look, we have decided we're sacking 800 people. There's no union in the world that's going to be happy with that, so why bother asking them? But I do think as well, another thing that stood out for me, which I thought was like kind of sensational in a way. So he was on, I believe he said £300,000 a year, this guy Peter, and part of his bonus anyway is performance related. And when asked repeatedly whether or not he would accept a bonus if it was offered to him, he said, I can't answer that, which means yes.
Yeah, of course it does. I mean, I think it's a fascinating session. There are lots of people going to be angry, and he did mention that he has started, or P&O has started seeing cancellations from people who are, their reputation, let's be honest, is they're going to take a lot of work to rebuild after they've done this. He's convinced that the business is now going to survive as a result of the actions the company has taken, but it's one thing whether the business survives just about, and another thing about the reputation they've built over decades and decades.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of hard to desecrate it, really. And look, you know, we were chatting about this off air, really, and we were saying, well, look, people do get made redundant all the time. I mean, they do, and you know, it's not uncommon for companies to make vast swathes of its employees redundant. But it's the optics of it, isn't it? And it's the way of doing it. And I think, you know, pre-recorded 2-minute-long Zoom call out of the blue, followed by handcuffed trained staff of security guards getting on a boat.
Yeah, because he mentioned there, didn't he, that he was questioned on why they hired a private security company to actually, I think it was to escort, I might be wrong on that, but to oversee, I suppose, the sacking of these 800 members of staff. And his response was that it was for the safety of the staff themselves, which, you know, many people might raise an eyebrow to, because clearly they anticipated perhaps some rebellion, and that's clearly why, well, one can suspect or speculate that that's what was really happening. They weren't trying to keep their staff necessarily.
No, it's a bit Orwellian, isn't it? For your own safety, we're dragging you off the ship. Anyway, people should boycott P&O Ferries. This is the view of Louise. It's utterly disgusting and unacceptable, and I would never use their ferries. There we go. So that's the view, Louise. There's quite a lot of this going about, as you would imagine. But some people are saying, I think this is Terry. No, he's asking us a question, actually. He goes, P&O are saying it is bust if the changes are not forced through. So that's what he's saying.
Yeah.
Well, which is an interesting point, isn't it? I suppose, because he made the point there, Peter Hebblethwaite, that there was about another 1,200 staff, I think he said, that would have lost their jobs if the company went bust. So you can understand that, but it's the way it looks.
And to be fair, that is the business reality of the situation, and a lot of you are also getting in touch pointing that out. Graham here says, the committee's questions showed that its members have no idea what it takes to run a business and how uncompetitive the unions and UK law has made shipping operations from the UK. Higher costs mean customers pay more. So he's saying, look, these are the tough business decisions that do have to be made sometimes, and the MPs on that committee simply don't see the reality of that. Peter also says here, strange that the witch hunters on the committee are incompetent politicians that have no experience in business and are only trying to be celebrities of politics. So he says, actually, they're trying to grill the CEO because it gives them political brownie points, I suppose. But they are asking, I was impressed with the questions, and they gave the man a grilling, I think it's fair to say.
I mean, they do. Look, regularly at these committee hearings, you do sit through a room full of people who haven't got much of a clue what they're on about, just desperately trying to ask a gotcha question at an individual. But I must say, I did think, whatever your name was, sorry, I did think that in this particular case, those questions were pretty pertinent and were pretty good. A lot of people annoyed, really, about this whole thing, and 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 basically as well, obviously the fact that they've decided to essentially outsource the labour. It's not very Brexity, is it?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's not a good look. I mean, just from that sort of 40 minutes that we saw there, really, it came out that, well, they were saying he knew he broke the law, or that's what the question they were asking him, and he's saying actually we weren't aware of that fact that we were breaking the law in doing what we did. He said he didn't sign off this security risk assessment as the CEO, which is incredibly bizarre for this massive decision. Those figures he gave there about how much they'll now be paying their employees, £5.50 or 15. Not a good look at all for this man, to be honest.
Well, that's it from us. Thank you very much for everyone who's been tuning in and messaging in, etc. Great to have you all on board, but don't go away, because up next is the briefing with Gloria De Piero.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Another sunny one today, and there's plenty more to come over the next few days as well. It is a little cloudier today across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, thanks to this weather front that's fairly weak, but it is just drifting in. High pressure, though, remains dominant and will continue to control our weather well into the weekend. That weather front, though, may just introduce the odd little bit of drizzle here and there over the Highlands, and come this afternoon there is the small chance of seeing showers break out over parts of northern England and eastern Scotland, but they'll be very isolated. Most places dry, certainly lots of sunshine for England and Wales, and again temperatures high teens, maybe up to 20 Celsius across parts of the southeast. Not quite as warm for Scotland and Northern Ireland because there is a little more cloud around here, but that cloud should tend to break up. Any of those showers over northeast Scotland will fade away quite quickly this evening. And then it's another dry night with long clear spells. Could turn a bit misty once more. A few fog patches are possible across parts of eastern England, but generally it's clear, and those temperatures tumbling down close to freezing in towns and cities across the south. Quite as cold further north, but there could be some pockets of frost almost anywhere in the countryside. On to the details for Friday. Any morning mist and fog will clear away. Yes, it'll be chilly first thing, but the sun will